Speaker, speaking of the bill.
The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. It's Monday morning, so I thought we'd start with a quiz. So here's the question of the morning. Guess the author of this quote. Quote, "The separation of powers is a bedrock principle of Virginia government. It is so significant that it appears in two separate provisions of the current Virginia Constitution." The answer will come in a few minutes. Article 1, Section 5 of the Virginia Constitution establishes the separation of legislative, executive, and judicial branches as separate and distinct. Article 3, Section 1 of the Virginia Constitution says that these shall be separate and distinct so that none exercise the powers properly belonging to the others, nor any person exercise the power of more than one of them at any one time. Strict constructionists, take note. There was a lot of discussion on Friday suggesting that the Attorney Generals always defend all Virginia laws. Well, that actually is not the case. Attorney Generals commonly make decisions that draw little complaint, which involves them deciding not to defend certain things. No one complained, for example, when former Attorney General Cuccinelli agreed or argued that the OEI was an unconstitutional act of this assembly and he would not defend it. That was just last year, 2012. He made a decision and he was within his right to do so. No one complained when former Attorney General Kilgore declined to defend a constitutional challenge to the Virginia Constitution that originally prohibited the incorporation of church and religious denominations, a provision of this Constitution that was ultimately struck down in 2002. Not only did he fail to defend a law, he refused to defend a Virginia constitutional provision. No one complained when the former Attorney General Kilgore joined 43 other state attorneys general in taking the position that attorneys general are within their constitutional authority when they seek to invalidate a state law which an attorney general determines and believes is unconstitutional. When these 43 attorney generals stated that when a law violates the U.S. Constitution, the attorney general said it was their paramount obligation to defend the Constitution and not to defend an unconstitutional law. Why did these attorney generals take that position? Because it is consistent with the separation of powers doctrine articulated by our founding fathers. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Speaker, this bill is not about whether the Attorney General in this case exercised his power and discretion consistent with his oath. Under strict separation of powers doctrine, the strict constitutionalist interpretation, he was within his right. Now, this is about same-sex marriage and the Attorney General's effort to assist citizens who are seeking to marry the person that they love. Let's put aside the constitutional justifications for the Attorney General to act. Is he right on the law? He is. A growing body of law holds that same-sex marriage prohibitions are unconstitutional because they violate the Due Process Clause under the 14th Amendment. We had a similar case in Virginia many years ago. It was entitled Virginia versus Loving, and you've heard about it a lot. The Supreme Court held that the right to marry is a fundamental right and that a law that allowed some persons to marry, in that case, race couples to marry, same-sex race couples to marry, but did not allow other couples, in that case interracial couples, to marry, was clearly unconstitutional. We have the same situation now, and that is why that it is unconstitutional. Ladies and gentlemen, this bill purports to give standing to each one of us and potentially create 140 little attorney generals standing before the court to do whatever they wish. I assume that's to represent the interests of the Commonwealth. But think about this scenario. Imagine that this law passes and both the gentleman from Prince William and the gentleman from Henrico get standing to argue this constitutional law case. It's before the courts now on same-sex marriage. While this might be enjoyable to watch, which of them would actually speak for the Commonwealth? Delegate Marshall or Delegate Morrissey? And think about other cases. Remember, this bill is written, it says it involves the constitutionality, legality, or application of a law. It's far-ranging. And so we could have all of us intervening in these court cases. And what happens if the Attorney General decides to settle a case? Do we have to all be involved in negotiating that settlement? Submit that would create chaos. To pass this bill strikes at the heart of the separation of powers. That's why it should be opposed. And by the way, the author of the quote, "The separation of powers is a bedrock principle of Virginia government," is not Madison, it's not Jefferson, it is not Marshall. And I don't mean the gentleman from Prince William. It is none other than Ken Cuccinelli. Mr. Speaker, I hope we will not support this bill.